always such a pleasure to be back home. Each country I go to in Africa, I pronounce myself a citizen of that country. And today, I'm Rwandese. But what gives me more pleasure is being in a discussion such as the one we're having today, which is shifting from trying to learn what is wrong, what needs to be done, to being more action-oriented. And for me, that gives me great pride as an African to know that there's more ownership being assumed, more solutions actually being sought within Africa to try and ensure that we are moving in a direction where we have better lives for our people within the continent. For those that may not be aware of the organization that I come from, the International Trade Center is a joint agency of the World Trade Organization and the United Nations, working to connect micro, small, and medium enterprises to international market. A critical area for the priorities or the priority actions that have been identified in relation to the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. I think a lot of detail was provided this morning regarding this particular aspect, and I will not dwell much on it. Suffice to say that as an organization, we focus mainly on creating more competitive micro, small, and medium enterprises, stronger business ecosystems, and better regulatory environments in Africa and beyond. Because if we are looking to trading, of course, it's about the intra-African trade, but it is also about going beyond that and making sure that we optimize the benefits of the African Continental Free Trade Area. This year, Biashara Afrika has issued us with an important call to action that we each show the courage and the commitment to invent a new future for Africa underpinned by the African Continental Free Trade Area. To effectively answer this call, we must ensure that African private sector is in the driving seat to guarantee an inclusive future for micro, small, and medium enterprises, including those led by women who often are left behind. Our statistics have shown us that women only lead or own 1/3 of Africa's SMEs, and only 22% women-led firms actually export. That is an aspect that we need to address ourselves to. We simply cannot accept continuity of this, but we have to work together to do that. On the other hand, we also know that there are 50 million MSMEs across the African continent. These firms are an integral part of the AfCFTA's success, and we must do everything in our power to ensure they benefit from the $22 billion in export growth potential that this trade agreement could achieve. This is a figure we have established through our research. Yet, the reality is that too many of Africa's businesses of all sizes are still not fully aware of all that the AfCFTA has to offer, or how to derive benefits from the arrangement. A survey recently undertaken by PAFTRAC was where it was established that only 40% of respondents said they knew and understood the agreement well, far short of where we should be. Additionally, far too many businesses, roughly 3 to 4, saying the agreement has had little or no impact on their firms yet. These respondents are, however, holding very high expectations for what the AfCFTA could offer their businesses, but they clearly say they need our support for them to be able to take advantage of the new market opportunities. This is why, as an organization, ITC is making sure to scale up our support to Africa, where we already are supporting 50 countries of the 55, if I had the number correctly earlier on, doing various or implementing various projects, but all forging ahead towards how the countries can better position themselves in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities that are there. We also are now implementing a corporate initiative called One Trade Africa, which aims to empower, enhance, and enable African SMEs and women and youth entrepreneurs to fully capitalize on the AfCFTA. How are we doing this? First, by awareness raising and sensitization, because the AfCFTA must be known not just by African giant businesses, as you heard this morning. It's important to make sure that we are approaching this from an inclusive perspective, ensuring that even the small ones are being brought on board, including those that are operating informally. Second, by public-private dialogues. For the private sector to thrive under the arrangement, SMEs must be at the table, sharing with governments and others the challenges they face when trading on the African continent and how they can be supported. Third, by training. The AfCFTA will not yield the desired effects of its rules unless its rules are understood, which is why, together with AfriExim, we have equipped over 10,000 SMEs on how to export with the AfCFTA. Fourth, connecting and strengthening the business support organization with a focus on women and youth associations. We know that through this, we can ensure that these institutions are able to support the African businesses ecosystem, adapt and deliver relevant AfCFTA services and speak as one to advocate for their interests. Fifth, working with businesses across the value chain to ensure that we are supporting the production side and indeed the adaptability, particularly taking into account the issues of sustainability that we all have been talking about. Finally, through business matching, MSMEs require the backing to identify, match with, and exploit new buyer and sales opportunities created by the AfCFTA. Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, let me now focus a little bit on why it was important for us to be here. This morning, there was the pronouncement of the Guided Trade Initiative Phase 2, which is really calling on all of us to see how we can accelerate our efforts in supporting the different countries. For years, we have been fortunate to work closely with the AfCFTA Secretariat, making the work for Africa's private sector really functional and operational. We have partnered with the Secretariat on its private sector engagement strategy, developed an AfCFTA glossary publication, mobile applications, and jointly conducted a private sector mapping to review the competitiveness of African firms in AfCFTA priority value chains. This is good, but as we heard from SG this morning, there's absolutely more to be done. And as an organization, we want to give you our commitment as member states and indeed as Secretariat SG, that we will stand with you together with others, because we do realize that the task before us is really one that is very demanding, one that needs to bring together different expertise, but one that each one of us can contribute to, and making sure that we are putting together building blocks that get us to the Africa that we are all seeking. I wanted to end by giving you an example of what it is that this really means for businesses. Aside from supporting the implementation committees and providing tailored coaching, we have one example that we have brought here today. In June of this year, Fair Africa took part in the Good Life Show in Cape Town, an event that showed them the opportunities within the lucrative South African market. However, Fair Africa also realized that high tariffs could get into their way, which is why they took part in a workshop that we had organized together with AfriExim and the ECOWAS Commission in Africa on how they could export under the AfCFTA. And today, Fair Africa is one of the exhibitors that we have here. But the point I wanted to make here in summarizing what is a fairly long example I was going to share is that they are in the final stages of connecting to the South African market. And we know there are more stories like this out there. And we also know that there are also more possibilities out there. But this can only happen if we all work together. It remains critical that ITC, together with the other international organizations, regional organizations, and I stress that because the objective should be to ensure that we underpin that capacity in the continent to make sure that everybody is able to move forward even when that support is not there. I wanted to end by saying this morning I was very struck by the quote that was shared on the screen, which was referring to disruption and madness as an essential aspect of the success that we are all seeking, and perhaps using that channel to be able to actually meet that objective. And I wanted to say, from the work that we are doing in all the different countries, I must say there's already a degree of that happening. Why do I say that? I see women that were not able to trade starting to trade, using different ways to connect, using different means to network, using different information to be able to produce and be able to get their product to markets. But more importantly, I see the younger generation's efforts in being innovative. They're using AI to get ahead of us. I think many of us, like myself, if I may put myself in that bracket, we're very much on the traditional side of how businesses should be developed. But what we also see is that they can't have the access to market. They could have better information that can enable them to make the informed decisions. And we just need to be there to ensure that not only are they getting this, but also the access to finance being provided in different forms. That is what is going to make the change. Giving that support from the different angles, whether government, whether from us as development partners, and indeed whether from those who are providing the financial resources. Collectively, we need to ensure that our coordination structures are working well and we are responding to the priorities of the countries that have asked us to accompany this process. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for all of you coming through. Thank you to our esteemed panel. I think let me start with you because you're seated right next to me. Madame Fatma Lavatas-Sase, the UNDP resident representative in Rwanda. I think the biggest issue here is scale, support, facilitation, access. And in that area of capacity building, it's really the work that the UN has been doing with the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat and the countries of the region to say, let's put in motion the building blocks. So what does that entail?
Panel members, colleagues, and participants, I want to start with a very bold statement that says, a prosperous Africa needs to produce and trade more of what it consumes, and we see that happening. We have seen the resilience of the economies in Africa, even in COVID or current ongoing conflict in different parts of the world. Countries and economies in Africa are really coming out strong. Even if we look at Rwanda, where we are today, we see the country with a GDP growth rate of in the 9% region for the first and the second quarters. We also know that with that resilience comes a lot of opportunities. We have learned that the continent will have 1.7 billion people by 2030. What does that mean for the AfCFTA market? Markets are no longer defined by geographical boundaries of one country, but they are defined by the continent. A second truth that I think is also important is the continent is the fastest urbanizing place on the earth, with about 500 million people expected to leave rural areas to the cities in 2040. This means we have a demographic bonus as well as thriving cities. So therefore, integrated markets through the AfCFTA are critical. But let me come more specifically to your question around what UNDP has done in this area. First, to say everything that UNDP has done and is still doing around supporting the rollout and implementation of the AfCFTA is through the very strong partnership with the AfCFTA Secretariat. And secondly, our work has transcended national, regional, as well as continental level. Regional, and here I really refer to the regional economic communities, RECs. We work with almost all of them. We've provided capacities in countries for institutionalizing the AfCFTA, including in policies, as well as having the institutional structures for the implementation of the continent at the country level. The Secretariat also, that we know has a very large coordinating role, have been supported. But let me wrap that up around the MSMEs themselves, which I know my sister from ITC has really underscored the importance. Economies of Africa are driven by MSMEs, and this is a reality. Two things that UNDP does very strongly with MSMEs is building their capacities, and most importantly, strengthening their trade readiness. I know you haven't given me a time, but I'll wrap up. I know I have another opportunity. Participants and fellow panel members, I want to use an analogy in physics that will help us understand what UNDP does with MSMEs better. And I hope I'll recall my physics very well. We know about kinetic energy and potential energy. Yeah. It's kinetic energy when the object is moving. It's potential because it's just in the hand. To explain that further, a ball in the hand has potential energy. A ball you throw has kinetic energy. MSMEs have potential. But let me use the second analogy. A mango hanging on a tree has potential energy to fall off. As it is falling down, it's kinetic energy. But until you exert a force onto that mango, it will only have potential energy, but not kinetic energy. Meaning you have to hit it, you throw a stone at it, and then the mango will fall. MSMEs have the potential, but until we do something to unleash that potential, they will not be able to explore what it takes. And I think this is exactly what UNDP does, building MSMEs capacities as well as strengthening their trade readiness, and we have massive examples around that. Finally, we have worked very closely around providing support for implementation of key initiatives, including the Guided Trade Initiative, and we're happy to see the second phase. Happy to come back later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Sese. I can see all the panelists thinking, where was I in science class? Okay, using that metaphor, David B., I'm going to ask you to come in because the work of Trademark Africa is exactly that, to remove or move SMEs from their potential into motion, into actualization. And as we talk about a guided trade initiative, that's exactly what the program is about. It's about saying, don't look at what may be, let's bring it to life. So what is the support at a policy level, technical level, financial level that's needed to, create that kinetic energy?
Many thanks. I'm not sure that my analogies will be half as good as yours. And I should know, I've never heard Margaret Thatcher quoted quite so many times in a conference. To provide a bit of framework, Trademark Africa is an African not-for-profit aid for trade institution. We've invested around $1 billion in trade facilitation in the last 10 years. I think that makes us the least important person here because we exist for the success of the private sector. And it's the private sector whom the AfCFTA is serving and who will drive economic growth in Africa. I heard some very wise words this morning. We have seen the huge success of the AfCFTA in the last few years. As people have noted, it was only 2018 when it was still an idea and a dream. We've seen already 90% of tariffs negotiated away. We've seen e-tariff books produced, and a whole range of protocols negotiated and ratified. This is astonishing progress. And yet, as the Prime Minister of Eswatini said, less than 15% of intra-African trade is intra-African, within the continent. The SG was talking about infrastructure gaps, the huge cost of logistics, and His Excellency the President put his finger on the word, which for us is non-tariff barriers. He said we absolutely have to remove non-tariff barriers as a priority. I think it was UNCTAD who estimated that if we remove all tariff barriers in Africa, we will manage to reduce the cost of trade by $3.5 billion a year. If we remove non-tariff barriers, that will go down by $20 billion. And this is absolutely critical for SMEs. SMEs are the entities that are least likely to be able to tackle these barriers. And these come in all shapes and sizes. They come in a lack of one-stop border posts, a lack of investment in ports, in critically the asymmetry of information that we see across the continent. If I can perhaps mention three areas. First is policy, second is accessibility, and the third is capacity. So one lesson that we have learned, we have seen major progress in driving down the cost and time of trading across borders, especially in East Africa, but now across the continent. But very often, those benefits do not accrue to SMEs until we focus on the specific problems that SMEs have. So we can see it is far easier to export your containers out to the rest of the world. But if I'm an SME, do I have the regimes in place that make it easy and cost-effective for me to apply the certification, the standards, everything that goes around a trade transaction? So firstly, policy. We really need to see simplified trade regimes, not only negotiated at regional and continental level, but critically domesticated. Because again, we can have very good quality policy, we can have good papers, and often we do, but unless that is domesticated at the national level, we're not going to see the benefits for the bottom of the pyramid. Second is around accessibility. We have seen huge gains in digitization of trade processes. But again, some of that digitization does not touch SMEs. We've put in place single windows in various countries, integrated customs management systems. I think they've had a major effect on some of the larger companies. What we need to do is to focus that accessibility on what SMEs need. For example, e-commerce platforms. I was talking with someone over lunch who said that we now have about 800 e-commerce platforms across the continent. How many of those are focusing on people who do not have a smartphone? If I can only use a normal phone with USSD, do I have the ability to market information, to linkages in with aggregators? We're trying to plug some of those gaps, and I know that many people here in this room are doing the same. But my message there again is we need to focus on what an SME needs and then answer that question specifically. And third is around capacity. I know that my colleague in ITC is doing a huge amount of work with companies to understand the potential from the AfCFTA. We're doing similar things. What we need to do is to not only increase market information, but to create the business-to-business linkages. So to ensure that if I'm a small-scale avocado producer in Rwanda, I know where I'm going to be able to sell my products. I know what the platform is, I have access to that, and I have access to the information and the skills that can be provided so that I can grow into a medium-sized enterprise and hopefully something larger. Thank you.
Thank you. So a lot of what you've said, I think, really speaks to the challenges that currently exist in terms of access, digitalization, certification of products, movement, and the solutions that are proffered. So what I'd like to do now is let's not focus so much on the enabling environment and get to the bare bones of what it is to trade. And I'm going to defer now to Brigitte Harrington, who is the founder of Igire Coffee, Rwanda, and they have an operation in Ghana. My understanding is you have used this system 3 times already. I stand to be corrected.
That's correct.
And how has it worked for you?
So I think what I'd like to do is just to talk a little bit about the 3 times, and then I'll go into how it's working, because some of the challenges that we have are the same challenges we had 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, October of 2022, Igire Coffee Company was the first one to trade on behalf of Rwanda and on behalf of all of Africa under the Guided Trade Initiative, and we sent 105 kilos of coffee to Ghana. And when it got there, since that's the country that I'm from, I thought that this is going to be great. I know everyone, so we'll just distribute to the supermarkets and life will be wonderful. And I got a very huge, rude awakening, and the awakening went like this. We have a group of people, me, Brigitte, I call them a cartel, that have cornered this market, and we own all the supermarkets, and we're not interested in your products because we're importing products from France and from Lebanon and from other various places. So at that point, I sat down and I said, okay, fine, we need to figure out how to penetrate this market. And if I'm having this challenge, then that means that any other micro, small, or medium-sized business will have the exact same challenge, which at that point is going to cause them to just say, okay, I'm not doing this. Let me go back to shipping raw materials. So I sat down and I developed a plan which I called Disrupt. Let's disrupt business that's going on as normal. And so what that looked like was the following. And I've spoken about it to anyone who has listened to me for the past 2 years, which is, in order for us to penetrate other markets, we can't go alone. We have to come together, and we have to aggregate and consolidate products that are made in your country and then take them to another country and figure out how to penetrate the market. So that brings me to the 3rd time. The 3rd time is, you mentioned Igire Coffee Company. I'm the CEO of Igire Continental Trading Company. We are the AfCFTA trading company here in Rwanda. And when our president, Paul Kagame, mentioned that there was a company in Rwanda who was the first one to aggregate a shipment and to send it, that was us. So we shipped 900 kilos of coffee, tea, avocado oil, and honey to Ghana on the 25th of September. I can tell you the 25th of September was exactly 2 weeks ago. Now, how do I know this? Because our shipment just came out last night. You're clapping, and it was a feat. But at the end of the day, and I don't want to be negative about this, but until we get customs under control in all of these countries, Someone might ship, and after that, they're going to walk away from it. And the reason that they're going to walk away from it is the first thing that happened to us, well, the second thing that happened to us was the fact that Customs said, we don't believe this is the value of the goods. So then it took another 2 to 3 days, and they requested that I sent the export declaration. So I sent the export declaration, and the value on the export declaration was the same as the value on the import declaration. So after they decided to do whatever they did for 2 or 3 days, they said, okay, fine, we'll let this go. Then the second thing was, we don't like the freight rate that you paid. So our president mentioned earlier today that there is a special rate with Rwanda Air for made in Rwanda products. That is $1.40 a kilo, up to 1 ton, and over 1 ton, it's $1 a kilo. And if you'll remember, I mentioned that we ship 900 kilos. So the freight that was listed on the airway bill was $1,275. Ghana decided that we don't like that, so we're gonna add another $1,030 to it. So we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I sent the bank deposit slip, I sent the EBM receipt, and for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a government issued receipt here for the payment of that bill and the airway bill again. Still, they decided that they were going to leave the freight rate as it is. Now, I'm going to go off a little bit, but it's going to all be in the same area. AfCFTA is great. We have to keep fighting, but we have to get the customs officers in check. And I'm saying this because the other thing is, when you look at the BOE, the Bill of Entry, otherwise the Import Declaration, and you look down at the declared value, well, you start off with the value of the goods, then you go to what the declared value is, and that's cost, insurance, and freight. And why someone is charging duty, taxes, tariffs, and non-tariffs on freight that wasn't even paid in their country, I don't know, but that's what happens. Okay, look down. The duty was 6% across the board. Hallelujah, praise God, this was a wonderful day. Until we get to the other part. The total amount that we paid in duty, taxes, other tariffs, and other non-tariff barriers came to a total of, and I'm not making this up, 59.7%. So if you take 59.7% and you minus 6%, you have 53.7%. Let's just round it up, we're all friends here.
55.
So 54%. Now, mind you, remember I told you they decided to add on to the freight. So I had to pay on top of that. Then in addition to that, this story, I wish I could say it was over, but it's not. But then what happened was, as I'm sitting and I'm looking at all of this, and I said 2 weeks because I remember that the shipment got there 2 weeks ago, then there's that little bitty issue of demurrage. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's storage fees. So if your product sits in the airport or in the harbor for longer than 3 days, then every day that it's there, you have to pay storage. So when I talked to my clearing agent at first, he said, I think it's 90 cents per kilo per day. And I was freaking out because to me that was $900 a day. Now I'm 10 days into this, that we have to, that's $9,000. So imagine how happy I was when he called me yesterday and told me it was only $1,000. I was jubilating. Who jubilates over having to pay $1,000?
Yeah.
So then after we paid the duty and the taxes, another bill came and it was called penalty. So I called to ask what the penalty was for. They said, oh, you delayed in paying the duties and the taxes, so this is the interest on it. So these are some of the challenges that we have to figure out how to fix. And the reality on the ground for me is, and those of you that know me know that I will fight you to the end, but not everybody is me.
Yeah. Let me bring you now into the conversation, your experience, Mrs. Chinwe, Ezenwa from Leluk, Nigeria. First, if you could tell us what Leluk is, but you know, as I say Nigeria, many things come to my mind now as, ooh, the Forex, how much more did it cost you with the devaluation? Could you get it to the market? Was there fuel? There are a lot of things I want to ask, but I'm just going to let you tell your story.
Well, I thank all the distinguished ladies and gentlemen in the hall. My name is Chinwe Ezenwa of Leluk, and today I have a new name, 0001. Well, as I always tell people, business is war. And you have enemies on all the fronts. I have been in this journey for the past 39 years, and I'm 73 years old.
No!
Yes. All right? So I have a lot of experience I can share, starting with the name of my company. My company is a child of necessity because I had a brother who was challenged. He couldn't talk, he couldn't hear, but I told him, you can look. So I had to give the name Leluk to encourage him. So, 39 years of journey, what do you want to hear? What do you want to hear? I'm grateful to Segun Awolowo, who brought me to this stage. Yes. Because I have been dreaming of a day I will be in a stage like this.
No.
Yes. Because AfCFTA and its certificate that I got, I call it Certificate of Prosperity.
Oh.
Yes. Because I lived to see that certificate of prosperity. I decided I'm going to allow the younger ones to prosper through my enterprise. And because of that, Leluk is engaged in manufacturing beautiful bags that has traversed all over the world. Because of that, Leluk has established a Leluk Bag Academy that trains youths in the art of bag making. It's called Leluk and Learn the Art of Bag Making, because even if you are disabled, you can look and learn. All right? So, under this guided trade initiative, I'm so sorry about your experience, because mine is pleasurable. Yes. I'm trading with Kenya. I trade with Ethiopia. I trade with Rwanda. I trade with Ghana. I trade with Cameroon. If I could trade with America, why can't I trade in Africa? All you need to do is you take the good with the bad. It cannot be pleasant all the time. Yes, because I'm so sorry. I was expecting also a lot of people from customs from all over Africa to be here. Because when you talk about trade barriers, some of them are getting it right, some are not. The Nigerian customs recently have gotten it right because of their new leadership. We have what they call authorized economic operators, and Leluk was able to be appointed as one of such under the Nigerian customs. And even the World Customs Organization has recognized my enterprise. But it comes with a lot of work. Many people want the job, they don't want the work. So business has a lot of work. Documentation is one of it. And if you're not ready for it, you're not ready for business. I sit here and I have heard so many people complain. It's part of the war in business. So you have to take it. Or if it is too hot, you get out of the kitchen. Yes. Yes. Because nobody goes to a prosperity field without thorns.
Yeah.
You can't prosper without thorns. Even roses. You want to get a rose, you have to go through the thorns. So, guided trade initiative in Nigeria was done in a different way. They guided us all the way. All the way. So education is part of it. Capacity building is part of it. If you don't train them, don't blame them. Train the youths, leave a legacy of training. UNDP has come finally to support Lelouk massively through her AfCFTA project, headed by, one of them came to this conference, Claire Henshaw. And Ahona came to launch it in there. And I became the biggest beneficiary because they brought 100 women, youths, and people living with disability. They are currently training in the best academy in the entire Africa.
All right.
You are free to come and visit Lelouk Bag Academy and see what prosperity for the future 2063 is for the African youth. Thank you.
Dr. Edom, let's bring you in Afro Champions because a lot of things are going on here. So 2 entrepreneurs are having 2 different experiences. To be fair though, Brigitte didn't say it was all bad. It was fine moving from Rwanda. It wasn't so great when it got to Ghana. So it works on the one side, on the export side. It didn't work really well on the import side. And I don't know if those are realities for many others where the movement is good. You know, from the connect, what's that metaphor you used? From she who was throwing, the potential is good. It's the landing on the other side that's not so great. So I'd like you to share with us just your insights on how businesses can be supported, because here we need to talk about single window systems at the customs level. We need to talk about the use of digital tools at the payment level. It shouldn't be hard to pay those duties from one country to another, converting currencies. Rules and harmonization rules, they've already been established by the AfCFTA. So why can't all member states just apply the rules? Why are people improvising these rules? So how do you work around a complex system like that?
So Lerato, I'll start first by saying that I recognize that everyone here is a champion in their rights, championing one thing or the other, whether it's in trading, whether it's in policy, whether it's in industry. I think where we need to figure out is how these champions can work collectively together, where everyone plays their roles in synergy and also bring complementary value to absorb our collective strength. And I think that's what we have to do as Africans. For me, that's where the real innovation is. It's not a lack of youth being able to deploy digital tools or innovate. It's not a lack of being able to build capacity for SMEs to grow their business. That's going on and it should continue. Where we haven't done well is our ability to absorb our collective strengths and be able to scale, as you said earlier. And so the approach Afro Champions has taken is to identify that there are existing champions, champions in regulatory, champions in private sector, champions in policy, and to try to experiment what it will take for these champions to co-create, co-own something that can scale and make it easy for the real champions, who are the SMEs, that from 90% of our economy contribute 50% to GDP, and also are providing employment to about 63%, 50% of productive capacity on the continent comes from them, that they will not encounter the kind of barriers and can be able to move smoothly and seamlessly. So that's where our focus has been. And I must sort of also amplify what others have said, my colleagues have said, which is that the battle, this kind of battle is not for the faint-hearted, right? And it's not for the swift. It's for those who are prepared to endure to the end. Because at every stage, you're going to find complexities and challenges. I mean, I remember in this room in 2018 when the agreement was signed, we didn't believe we were going to have even 44 countries signing. We got 44 countries. We didn't believe Nigeria was signed. Nigeria eventually signed. We didn't believe we'll get enough ratifications. We finally got ratifications. We didn't believe we'll be able to negotiate all the tariffs and all of that. That has been done. And so I think that gives us a lot of inspiration that no matter how Herculean we see the challenges, once we believe we're going to do it and we're committed to doing it, even if it's just a few handful of people, we will do it. And so where we find ourselves here is one, with the guided trade initiative that the Secretariat has envisioned, we decided to approach it from, and now with the digital protocol, to see what will take to integrate 1 billion people on the continent with no roads, rails connecting each other very quickly as a low-hanging fruit. So we decided to focus on the digital. We also realized that countries already have their own digital systems, right? Not only countries, but also regulators have their own digital systems. Businesses have their own digital systems. How does the trader journey go? It goes from moving goods from one shelf to the other. Even to move goods from their homes to shelves in their own countries is a challenge, right? And now you're talking about getting to multiple countries. So until you get these digital systems connected and talking to each other, you still meet some of those problems. You know, even when they are working in perfection, you still find those challenges. So I think we focus there in trying to see, first of all, do a needs analysis to see what systems currently exist. Because remember, we're talking digital trade here. Most of those regulators are not reporting to ministers of trade or industry. They are working with ministers of trade and digitalization and ICT. You're going to meet the FDAs, who I'm sure you had to meet. They are not under the Ministry of Trade either. They're under the Ministry of Health. And then you're going to meet other customs who are under the Ministry of Finance. They take instructions from different ministries and may not necessarily be so tied into what we are talking about here. So what we've done is to try to understand what they have, what systems they have. How do we ensure that these systems, because as many systems as we get integrated, you move the human element out of the way. And once these policies are programmatized into these systems, there will be no need anymore to find some of these complexities. Yeah. So the AfCFTA, which is another operational instrument of the CFTA, that we're supporting the AfCFTA Secretariat to develop, has now managed to fully integrate the country that you're struggling with, Ghana. They were the first country, by the way, to onboard on the AfCFTA platform, where currently the customs is onboarded, Food and Drug Authority is onboarded, all the freight forwarders and others are onboarded. We're now working with the Postal and Courier Services and Logistics to onboard all the motorbike riders that you're going to be needing to distribute your products. So with the AfCFTA number, you're able to track your goods, you're able to see where it comes from. But for this to work, you need multiple countries, right? So for Ghana, it's onboarded, but your imports are not benefit from it now because it's not integrated into Rwanda FDA. So if FDA Rwanda and FDA Ghana are interconnected, by the time your goods leave, there's no need for them to go through the process of trying to find this again. Kenya is the other country that's currently onboarding. We finished onboarding the Poisons and Medicines Board, and we are going to start a few products from Kenya and Ghana already moving, where the verification can take place seamlessly. I guess once you do that, then onboarding supermarket retail outlets and things like that will be easier. Then it should be possible for an SME to sit at home, get a product, get it moving, and be able to track it from one shelf from one country to the another. Let me conclude by saying that in developing this process, we've taken the hard route because we found that building something and trying to get people to own it or use it will not work. Yeah. You've got to work with what they have. you've got to almost work as if you're depending on nobody to give you donor money or anything, so that if nothing exists, you can function. Yeah. And in the process, we realized that whatever we're saying here is not new, right? We've attempted that in our attempt to create a common market at REX level. It boils down to two things. The real drivers of integration, who are your multinationals, as well as they're doing, they still don't have the resources to build the infrastructure to drive integration on the continent. The real beneficiaries of integration, which are your SMEs, really just don't understand markets outside their domestic market. The Ugandan SME doesn't wake up in the morning thinking, how do I put products on Senegal shelves? And the few like you who have attempted that, are facing challenges, right? And also but the Indian SME wakes up thinking putting things on Ghana, African market. The Chinese SME wakes up thinking that way. So a lot of it requires education, it requires doing exactly what the Guided Trade Initiative is doing, which is hand-holding. Hand-holding those who are doing it, giving them the support, connecting the regulators so that they move out of the way with the barriers, and eventually getting the retailers, so identifying the real stakeholders we need in this chain and onboarding them onto aggregated platforms with the right scaffolding to ensure that their goods can move across markets seamlessly. And we will get there. Thank you.
I think the broader issues have been raised. We know that we need to sort out the financial architecture for investing in SMEs, for trade facilitation. We need the regulators to come on board. We need the physical infrastructure to facilitate the trade. The goods must move to market. We can augment with digital tools and create efficiencies. But an important thing was said here right now by Dr. Edom, which is the mindset. You can't even begin to dare to dream and reinvent the future if you don't believe that your business in Kigali can thrive in Ghana or Nigeria or Egypt or Algeria, because you can't fathom in your mind access to those markets. And so if we just draw on that one point, knowing the limitations we've spoken about, but seeing the opportunity and knowing that the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, through the Guided Trade Initiative, are able to give you the leap into new markets. What would you say are the things that small and medium enterprises should consider joining this program, regardless of the challenges? So let's start with you, Madam Sase.
Our experience has shown that the continent is ready for a made-in-Africa trading. The continent is ready with a viable market of 1.7 billion people. And this is why, for MSMEs and to change the mindset, one of the strongest value addition of UNDP is supporting convenings of this nature and making sure MSMEs are present in these convenings. Because by bringing our diverse challenges, we are likely to have collective solutions instead of having them individually. So therefore, our support is continuing into more targeted initiatives, such as the market entry expedition and the B2B engagement. We've done that for a number of countries, and we will continue. We are not oblivious of the challenges that exist, especially logistical challenges that have been very well articulated here today. But we know there are solutions. The French call them groupage, bringing small SMEs together, which is exactly the direction that UNDP is moving nowadays. But we also know that bilateral regulatory cooperation is important to address bottlenecks. So what my sister is experiencing between Rwanda and Ghana, for example, you need bilateral. In an approach where you have an agreement that is continental, you still need two countries to have a conversation. Again, UNDP will stand ready here in Rwanda, liaising with our teams in UNDP in Ghana to see how we can support that process as well. But I agree that we do need customs in the room. Yeah. But let me conclude on this note. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ago, and I think Dr. Edom articulated this journey very well, we had more skeptics. But now we have more optimistic people about what the AfCFTA can do, and it holds a lot of potential in reducing the persistent poverty in some of the areas, given how far we have come.
Dr. Edom?
So my charge for SMEs is that the deeper integrations are ongoing. There are huge efforts underway. And we learned from Ethiopian Airlines earlier today that it took bigger companies like them to hold hands of smaller companies and give them support. A lot of the administrative, treaty, legal, policy work has already been done, and a lot of commendation goes to the Secretariat and also the AU and all of that. We can expect more from them. I think it's the chance now for the entrepreneurs and the big companies to start holding hands of the small companies.
Okay.
The big market really is in the informal sector. And that informal sector, AfCFTA is only going to be successful if they can feel it in their day-to-day operations. So part of going and providing this kind of support to the regulators, in our view, by connecting single window systems, FDAs across the continent, is to really begin to extend some of this support to them so that you're onboarding this informal market by going to the streets and then working them to the podium, as opposed to from the podium to the streets.
All right.
So they should find a lot of encouragement in the fact that a lot of work is underway with the help of the Secretariat. Thank you.
Brigitte Harrington, is there a round 4 for the Guided Trade Initiative for you?
Oh, definitely. And I would like to invite every woman here that is in business. There's a Women in Trade Forum on Friday where we will have a master class on exporting under AfCFTA and the Guided Trade Initiative. One of the subject matters also that will be discussed is cross-border payments. And we're also going to have a live in-person matchmaking session. So we ask you, if you have samples, bring them. We're looking forward to meeting you, and you'll have a few minutes to talk about your products, to talk about your transportation, your company, your country, with the objective of when you leave the room, you've signed a deal with someone. So come and see us. It's not over.
Matches made at the Kigali Convention Center. Okay. Dr. Beer?
One thing I've noticed about the conversation is that there's a huge amount of language around battle, business is war, the winner endures, obstacles, challenges. I am in awe of the business leaders here who are engaged in that battle. This shows we're in the wrong place. This is not where we should be. In 5 years' time, we should be coming here talking about battle between businesses because the environment is so easy that we're having competition. Right. So the question is, how do we get there?
Fantastic. Madam Mazenwa?
Yes, I will wrap up by advising the AfCFTA Secretariat to do more sensitization about AfCFTA in all the African countries, to do more, to teach the younger ones more, and then to have mentoring hubs. To each one, teach one. The MSMEs must adopt to each one, teach one. Then I'll round up by my famous quote by Robert Stevenson that says, and I quote, "Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant." And that is what the Guided Trade Initiative will be remembered for. Thank you.